Hello fellow moviegoers, and welcome to another review of a European movie. This time, it's a Serbian film. Now before I start this review, let me just quickly, turn off the monetization of this video. And I also want to give you guys a viewer discretion advisory. This video will talk about a lot of very sensitive topics. And as the title of this video might suggest, this is the most fucked up movie I've ever seen, and you might have realized I didn't censor the F word. That is because there's a lot of slurring that needs to be done to explain the things that are happening in this movie. You might also wonder why I have wet hair. Well, that's because after I saw this movie, I had to take a shower immediately. I wanted to take a shower while watching this movie, but I had to obviously finish it. So afterwards, I felt more dirty than I've ever felt. Alright, a Serbian film, one of the most fucked up movies I've ever seen. The movie starts off with establishing that our main character, Miloš, used to be a porn film actor in the most weirdest way possible by showing us a kid that watches his dad in a porn and then tells us about the tingling feeling he has in his stomach when he watches it. I think this kid is supposed to be like 7. So, yeah. Great start, great start. He then has a little dialogue with his wife talking about a new job opportunity that could potentially lead to a lot of money. He then meets up with a porn colleague of his who is currently working with a man named Vukmir. Here it's also established that Miloš is the GOAT of porn. He was able to keep an erection forever, and that he is kind of like the undisputed champion of porn, which is why this Vukmir guy 100% wants to be working with him. At the same time, Miloš's brother, Marko, who is a cop, is kind of preparing dinner with Miloš's wife, and here we see that his brother has a thing for Miloš's wife. So much so that he cannot be in a room longer for 20 minutes or so without having to go to the toilet to have a wank. So Miloš has his first meeting with Vukmir, where he kind of vaguely explains nothing. He's all about art and how porn is art and how Miloš was the great porn star of his time and that only he can be able to sort of produce the art that Vukmir wants to produce. And when he meets Vukmir, the funniest thing, they just hold hands for like a minute straight. I was so confused. I was like, what the hell is going on? I'm guessing this is to show the admiration that Vukmir has towards Miloš. Or maybe it's a Serbian thing, but what the hell? They just walk around holding hands for like 4 shots straight. Like, what? He's given a contract which he doesn't sign yet. It is also kind of established that Miloš is not stupid. He's a porn star with a doctorate. I don't know, the movie never tells us whether he reads the contract or not. They don't actually ever talk about the contract. He doesn't even talk about how fishy this whole thing seems with his wife. He also keeps asking Vukmir what the plan for this whole project is. And Vukmir just gives him very vague answers, telling him about art and how art is the only way to save whatever. But eventually Miloš decides to sign the contract because the money that he's being offered is just simply too much to refuse. But before Miloš has to film his mighty scenes, he has to get in shape. So he has to stop with the alcohol, has to do some meditating, so he can get back into his groove. Miloš is now ready to film his first scene, and as he gets out the car, there's immediately 2 cameramen that follow him. He enters an orphanage, yeah, you heard that right, and is greeted by a woman who kind of shows him towards a girl, but then the girl gets picked up by another woman, and he's all confused. And then both the women fight over the kid, and he's still there just looking confused. Then one of the women slaps the kid, and she's being escorted out by the bodyguards. Now, there might be some problems with the subtitles that I had, but I really didn't understand what the hell was happening here. We didn't know if this was her mother, if this was just some random woman. I might have missed something there. But now the scene continues, with the woman bringing Miloš back to a back room where she sucks his dick while he gets to look at girls eating ice cream and doing their makeup. So already there's a little thing with children in this movie, which I gotta say, man, it's so fucked up, man. Ah! And after the first scene, we see Milos drinking some whiskey. So all the work he's done before the shoot to get in shape is kind of falling apart because of his doubts as to what he's actually doing. So he asks his former porn colleague to tell him what's up with this Vukmir guy, and she tells him about how she has been fucking animals and that's good enough for her to get a paycheck. And Milos is still like, okay, whatever, I'll keep working with him. They even throw in a Graduate reference during this dialogue. I can't, man. I don't know, man. This movie's so stupid. For the next scene, he gets blindfolded while driving to the location of the set. There, he sees a woman who is being assaulted by one of the security guards, and she also proceeds to suck his dick. But he then realizes there's the child from the orphanage that we saw earlier in the room as well. He gets mad at that and tells everyone that he can't work under these conditions. The woman who is sucking his dick then proceeds to bite his dick. So one of the guards puts him into a chokehold and tells him to punch her, which he so graciously does. We then have one of the weirdest cum shots I've ever seen, and he then has a little talk with Vukmir, who keeps blabbering about how everything is art and everything is intentional and everything is perfect, or something like that. Honestly, we'll talk about Vukmir later, but Vukmir, he just talks about the same thing over and over again. Milos, who has now been caught completely off guard, finally asks his brother, who is also a cop, to investigate this Vukmir guy. Here we find out that Vukmir has studied children's psychology. But other than that, there's nothing really fishy about what's going on with this Vukmir guy. But he then gets picked up to Vukmir's office, and he then decides to retire from porn, or at least from whatever the hell Vukmir was doing. Because here Vukmir tells him that the future of Serbia depends on porn, and that only he and Milos with their combined strength can save the poor country of Serbia. He then proceeds to show Milos the new meta of porn. And this is where the movie goes from oh my god to And this is where I'm going to take a short pause to tell you guys, if anything that I previously said triggered you or made you uncomfortable, do not continue watching this video. What happens after this point in the movie is insanity. So you were warned, don't complain in the comments. Now let me describe this scene as fucked up as it is. So we see a video starting out with a pregnant woman. A man comes in and then proceeds to bring the baby out of the woman. He then proceeds to fuck the baby. Yeah. What the fuck? And we see all of it in pretty graphical detail. It's so graphic that when Milos leaves the room, you can see that the wall is censored. This is because this movie would not have gotten a theatrical release if some of this was cut out of the movie or just censored in general. As if what we saw wasn't fucked up already, there is a version of this movie that's even more fucked up. Vukmir himself describes this new meta of porn as new porn. So Milos leaves the office, but he realizes something ain't right. He starts getting really horny. And when he sees one of Vukmir's colleagues on the streets, we see that he has a very big desire to have sex with this woman. But then we cut to Milos waking up in his bed. Covered in blood, he looks for his wife and his kids, who don't seem to pick up their phone. And outside of his house is the BMW that has been picking him up for all the shoots. He has the key to the car. So now the movie does this non-chronological way of telling the story where we kind of see this mystery unravel sort of in front of his eyes. He goes to all the locations that he's been to. But the problem with this is that he never actually gets real clues. He goes to Milos's villa, which seems to just be open even though there's no one there. Then he picks up some videotapes, video cassettes that he watches on the camera that those were filmed on, and that's where he kind of gets the clues from. But let's go chronologically as to what happens. So the woman enters Milos's car. He is completely horned up. It turns out that the drinks that Vukmir has been giving him while showing him the newborn porn was also poisoned with bull Viagra. So he is now ready to mate. The next location we find is in the house of Vukmir, where there's a woman tied to the bed. Milos, completely out of his mind, thinking with nothing but his penis, is like a little dog on a leash that they can just let go and he will fuck anything that moves or lives. He then proceeds to have sex with the woman, but they keep telling him about the wrongs that this woman has done and how she has abandoned her children and whatnot. So they tell him to punch the woman while having sex with her. And it gets even worse as he then is given a machete with which he cuts off the woman's head while simultaneously having sex with the woman whose head is now non-existent. I told you guys, this movie ain't no joke. After remembering everything that happened, Milos decides to throw up and look throughout the house for more. This is where he finds the little tapes with the camera to get some clues as to what is happening. He looks at some of the videos. One of them is some of the earlier work he did with Vukmir, then the video of him decapitating the woman while having sex with her. And there's a little surprise clip of him getting fucked by one of the security guards. Then there's a random clip of Vukmir talking with Milos's ex-porn colleague, where she's like, "Oh no, you're not using him to your full potential. You've drugged him. You can't just drug the master of porn. If he does it naturally, it's actually art. I don't want to work with you anymore." And I don't know why someone filmed that. I guess it's just to help the audience out with what's gonna happen in the next video we see, which is her being tied up, all of her teeth removed, and a guy in a gimp mask sticks his cock in her mouth and then also holds down her nose, which means she can't get any air, which then proceeds to kill her. She got killed by a blowjob. Yes. One of the tapes is him with the girl from the orphanage earlier. She's also with an older woman who tells him that Milos is the man that will take the virginity of the daughter. Where we're like, okay, is Milos going to have sex with this kid? No, he does not. He proceeds to jump out the window in the most comical way, and then he runs away from the rest of Vukmir's gang. He goes to this supermarket with one of the hottest butchers I have ever seen, but he does not fall for temptation, and he kind of hides himself in an alley where he just kind of waits it out, and he calls his brother, telling him where he is to come pick him up. At the meantime, a girl in a very attractive and revealing dress gets hit on by two dudes, and he, in his completely horny state still, just has to masturbate to her, man. The two guys proceed to then beat him up for his very public displays of own affection, but then they are stopped by Vukmir's gang, who just insta-kill the other guys. Like, what the fuck? This time, Vukmir is also in the car. We get a flashback where Vukmir tells Milos of how monks used he-goats to sort of create the best thing you can put on bread by using their cum and mixing that with milk, and that Milos is his he-goat and he couldn't be doing what he does without his he-goat. It's honestly so absurd that it's kind of funny. So they drive Milos to this big facility. This is where the nurse keeps giving him more drugs to sort of keep him horny, but he still has a bit of a clear mind at that point before the drugs really hit, so he decides to hit her back with some of those drugs. He tries to run out, but one of the guards catches him and brings him to the shooting area. So here we keep cutting back from the present and the past. So we see everyone kind of dead already on the floor. So it kind of gives away what's gonna happen, but it doesn't really give away everything. So when we go to the past, we see two covered up figures with their butts out. And Milos decides to have sex with the first one and move on to the other one, which is a bit harder to get into. And we as the audience kind of can see that this is not an adult person. And then next to him comes up the guy in the gimp mask. Vukmir decides to take off the gimp mask. It turns out it is Marko, Milos's brother, next to him having sex with the person that Milos had sex with earlier before moving on to the smaller person. Vukmir decides to take off the mask of the person who is having sex with Marko, the cop brother, and it turns out it is Miloš's wife. And then he decides to take off the mask of the small person, and it turns out it's Miloš's son. Yeah, so at the point of standing, Miloš is having sex with his son while his brother is having sex with his wife. But a small distraction is created when one of the nurses of Vukmir enters the room with her vagina full of blood, and she holds a pole in her hands, implying that because of the bull Viagra that she was given by Miloš earlier, she wanted to have sex with a pole, which obviously is not the most healthy thing to do as a human being. She just falls down to the ground, which gives Miloš a little distraction to start getting a bit violent with everyone. Starting off with the wife, who regains her consciousness, who then proceeds to bite out the throat of Miloš's brother. Miloš immediately goes to Vukmir and assaults him, hitting him against the ground multiple times. He then manages to miraculously steal a gun from one of the guards and then shoots two of the guards, but then the third one comes charging in at him, and while even after shooting him twice, the guy's still alive. So how does he kill this last guy? And now I want to play a little game with you guys. How do you guys think he's gonna kill this dude? Option A, he punches the guy to death. Option B, the wife swings a bat at him. Option C, the cops show up and stop the whole thing. And option D, the son decides to join the fight and kicks the guy in the balls. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of time to think about these options here. Alright, enough time has passed. None of these options are right. The way he dies is that Miloš takes off the glasses of the guard, which reveals that the guard has a missing eye. He then proceeds to stick his cock into the empty eye socket until he fucking kills him with his cock in his brain. Yeah, I don't know how I was gonna put that as one of the three options. Now that everyone dead, even Miloš's wife is scared of him, but he has to knock her out because she's in a complete state of shock. And then in the flashback, we see that he brings them home to the basement and locks the basement. Why didn't he check the basement before? We don't know. So now, knowing the entire history of what happened, he comes back home to a completely traumatized wife and a kid that is pretty much unresponsive. And in the end, I'm guessing both Miloš and the wife decide to do a little classic old family suicide. Yay? So Miloš puts a gun to all of them and then shoots, and they all die. But the movie isn't over yet, because we see the corpses of Miloš and his family, and then we see a dude with a camera and two other guys who are about to have sex with the corpses of the deceased. And I'm gonna be real with you guys, I think that ending is hilarious, because what the fuck? I mean, what do I even want to say here? This movie is fucked up. This movie is just straight up fucked up. The big problem I have with the story, that I am not sure whether it's meant to be satire or not. Because there are scenes that are kind of taking themselves seriously, and then there are scenes that are just so absurd that you can't really believe that they're not taken this serious at all. The problem is that a story like this would have some sort of social message, but it really doesn't. It's kind of just trying to be fucked up for the sake of being fucked up. You're not meant to sort of think about this hypercritical, but at the end of the day, a lot of this is realistic in the way that I can see things like this actually happening in the real world. So the fact that they are tackling it in this very cheesy, corny, and over-the-top fucked up way, it seems very comical at times. Like, for God's sake, he kills someone by sticking his cock in his eye socket. And especially the ending. I remember when I watched this the first time I saw it, I remember like laughing out loud at the ending where the guys just come up to the corpses of the sad past family and just proceed to keep doing what they've been doing the entire movie. It is satirical, but at the same time it takes itself too serious at times to really be considered satirical. So I don't really know what the director's intentions were with the story, except for maybe telling the most fucked up thing you've ever seen. So congratulations, you could succeeded with that. As for the characters, outside of Miloš, we don't get too much from all the other side characters. The brother of him, the cop, To me, the twist doesn't seem that twisty because a lot of the things that he does earlier establish that he's a bit of a scumbag. He's a bad cop as well, and that he wants to fuck Miloš's wife. So there was always something hidden there, that he wasn't maybe the cleanest of cops. So didn't really like surprise me or like shock me. Miloš himself is pretty good. I think the acting he does is good. The insanity scenes are really good as well. Like his expressions are craziness, and the horniness, and just all around his demeanor seems, you know, messed up enough to make sense in the story. But I didn't really care too much about him. He's a bit of an idiot, and I don't like when main characters are idiots. He checks for his wife and his son. He doesn't check in the basement. Like, bro, what? The wife didn't really do anything. I mean, most of the women are just kind of like sex objects in this story, which is kind of sad, but that's just how it is. The kid actor was terrible. Like, even if it's a foreign language, I could tell like this kid sucks at acting, except for the ending where he has to look traumatized. I guess he did that well there, but when he speaks, he kind of sucks. And also, what the hell are kids doing in this movie? Like, seriously? Like, they can't show up to the premiere and watch this thing. But now we get to my personal character highlight of this movie, and that's Vukmir. Vukmir is just straight up insane. They gave the actor probably the dialogue that made no sense to anyone, and he was just like, all right, I'm just gonna scream every line. I'm just gonna be the most insanely crazy person about this. And I mean, he does that really well, and he's so freaking crazy and stupid and just maniacal that it kind of becomes enjoyable to a certain degree. But at the same time, I think that it's a bit too over the top at times. As I said, I don't know if this movie is trying to be funny. Bruh. But if this movie's trying to actually tell a message and trying to say something, it completely fails, and Vukmir kind of represents that at best. Let's move on to the visuals. Now, visually, this movie is weirdly lit. It's overlit at times, and then when the flashback sequence comes, it has like the cinema grain. There are some decent shots in it. What I really didn't like about the movie is the editing. The way it's just kind of non-chronologically edited, and that at the start it shows you those flashes like of the stuff that's going to happen. I don't know, like a lot of the editing takes away from the tension. I don't know why they used this in the first place. They could have just cut it chronologically and then, you know, him wake up and see his wife and kid and then kind of like come to realization the moment he sees them. I don't know, it feels like they kind of did it to be artsy and do the whole finding out mysteries and stuff. And I mean, if we're talking about the visuals, we obviously have to talk about some of the gore scenes, some of the sexual scenes, which I don't think I can show too much on YouTube because I have to put some pixels into them, so I don't think I can talk too long about them. I mean, the scene with the newborn porn is absolutely terrifying and really disgusting, and I think the practical effects that they used to show it off were also really good, surprisingly. I think the authenticity of it adds to the shock value because the baby doll that they use looks like it doesn't look bad, so to say. You know it's not a real baby, obviously, but it doesn't look unrealistic. The fucked up things that they wanted to show, they really put a lot of heart in it, and you can tell that they really wanted to traumatize you with this movie, and they put all their eggs in one basket, and they really did that well. As for audio, I didn't like the music at the start. There's some really annoying music at the start, actually. The instruments that they used just didn't fit the tone at all. I do like the outro song. The outro song straight up slaps. Like, once the movie ends and we get the little, you know, the ending, the tragic but also kind of funny ending, to me at least, the outro song does slap. So I guess shout out to that, but I think outside of that, the music wasn't that good. I think it actually was pretty bad at times. It felt like stock music. And now my overall opinion on this movie. I think I said it in the plot earlier, but I think the tone of this movie is trying to be serious, but it really comes across just comical a lot of the times. I saw myself laughing at points in the movie where I don't think I was supposed to laugh. Maybe it's a coping mechanism. Maybe that's kind of also the intention behind it. But I thought that the movie tries really hard at times to be deep, and it doesn't really come across deep. It just comes across pretentious. And I will now say, personally, I think this movie is just too fucked up. You can't just put this on and watch it, right? You can't watch this with your family. You can't really watch this with your friends. How the hell are you supposed to watch this movie? I don't know. What is the point of this movie? Being fucked up in a movie that a guy like me will review to people like you who are interested in the most fucked up movie ever made. And if that's your marketing scheme or like a way to get the movie to be acknowledged, then yeah, sure, go ahead and do that. But you're not gonna get any praise for doing that because I don't really see any artistic value in this movie. I think this movie's intention was just to be the most fucked up thing they could possibly put on a cinema screen, and they succeeded with that, and I think congratulations, but I don't see it as entertainment. I don't get anything out of this movie except for disgust, and if the movie's intention is to be disgusting or just horrifying in its depiction of pornography, then yeah, sure, go ahead, but you're not gonna get me on the same page as you because I don't think it is really that good. And even if there is supposed to be a message or motive, I didn't find it. If you did, you can leave it down in the comments and give me all the deep introspectives of this movie, and maybe my mind will change, but I don't think it will. And if I were to give this movie a rating, I'd probably give it a 2 out of 10. It is closer to a 3 than a 1, but I still think this movie doesn't deserve anything higher than a 2. It is a complete mess of a movie that makes you feel like a mess, that makes you feel dirty, wanting to take a shower right afterwards. My hair is already dried up, but you saw it was wet at the start of the video. If the intention of the movie was to be the most fucked up piece of media I have ever seen, then congratulations. 10 out of 10 when it comes to that. But I have to look at movies as a movie critic, and I can't bring myself to give this any higher than the 2 out of 10. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little shit show with me. If you did, please leave a like. Also, leave down in the comments below some movies you might want me to watch from your European countries. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more movie reviews, and I will see you guys soon.